Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Wednesday, August 13th. Coming up on 7 months. 7 months out of 48 of his presidential term. How you feeling?
It only feels like, I don't know, 80 months so far. So we're hanging in there. It's a lot of stuff going on, keeping us busy. Never a dull moment. And I guess, look, mission accomplished. I think he has moved past the Epstein scandal. Now, I have argued that this did some damage, and but that doesn't mean that it's gonna his presidency is gonna come to a screeching halt. And I do think certainly the topic of conversation has shifted. It's no longer dominating headlines.
Well, that's true, and obviously Trump has purposely done things, as he often does. It's one crazy thing after another, so your attention gets distracted. I'm not going to say it's the only reason why he does things, but I think it is in the mix. But when Congress comes back in September, are we going to, the discharge petition in the House is still lingering out there. So I do think this comes back. He hasn't put it to rest where nobody cares anymore. There's still the unanswered question: why can't you just do this when you said you were going to do it? And if you're not doing it, why is that? So I don't think I agree. It's a bit back burner for the moment, but I still think there's potential for it to return.
Yeah, look, I think Trump made a few promises. He said he was going to end the Russia-Ukraine war on day one. Obviously, that didn't happen. Obviously, that is Trump is meeting with Putin in Alaska this week to potentially try to resolve that. It doesn't look promising to me. Trump promised to bring down grocery prices and stop inflation day one. That hasn't happened. I think that's the biggest problem that Trump is going to have long term is the economy. Tariffs could obviously exacerbate this problem, inflation. But I do think the other promise, Bill, was to release the Epstein file, and he hasn't done that. And that is a broken promise that I think does hit a certain segment of his base who deeply cares about it. So it's not over, but he's done so many other crazy things that I guess we have to move on, and everyone else has moved on as well.
Well, and those things combined. I mean, if the economy was gangbusters, everything else should be secondary. We're still very anxious about tariffs. There's been a certain amount of commentary. Well, it hasn't been as bad as we thought. But prices still haven't come down on Trump's watch, which he promised would happen. And we know that businesses have been trying to absorb the cost as much as they can.
Yes.
We know that both the New York Times and CNN has done monthly tables of how much more tariff revenue we're collecting. It's shot up, more than triple of where we were before he came into office on a monthly basis. We peaked in July at about $30 billion. And if you haven't seen that, if you haven't seen like your grocery bill jack up that much, or your appliances, your electronics, or what have you, it's because the businesses have been trying to hold the line.
Yeah.
But they're saying is we can't keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened, a week and a half ago? More tariffs. It's not like
I heard Andrew Ross Sorkin was on, I think it was the Daily podcast, talking about this point. And apparently, like, companies, number one, they're afraid to raise prices because if you're the first mover at raising prices, you could lose your clientele kind of permanently. Even if other people subsequently raise prices, the first mover will be punished. The other problem is that the first mover could be punished by Donald Trump specifically. Like he could call you out and attack you publicly, which could have all sorts of ramifications as well. So apparently companies are trying to eat some of these costs without passing them along. But I got to tell you, totally anecdotal, right? I remember David Brooks a year or two ago got into some he got dragged a little bit on Twitter for tweeting out a receipt from like LaGuardia, buying a cheeseburger or something at LaGuardia Airport, along with some very expensive booze. But I will tell you, Bill, I am feeling it. I am seeing it. I mean, my wife this past week bought 3 chicken salad sandwiches at a deli in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Okay. This isn't DC. It's not New York. It's in a college town, granted, but it's in West Virginia. No drinks, no alcohol. 3 chicken salad sandwiches with side greens. Bill, do you want to take a guess what the going rate is for 3 chicken salad sandwiches at a deli in Shepherdstown, West Virginia is?
So I'm going to guess. I mean, I'm going to guess high, of course.
You know it's got to be. I wouldn't ask the question if it
Right.
wasn't ridiculous, right?
And is it fair to say Shepherdstown is a bit more upscale than the average West Virginia town?
Yes. So it's a college town, and it's in the Eastern Panhandle, which is close to Virginia. But it's still West Virginia. It's not New York. It's not DC. It's not LA.
So 3 chicken salad sandwiches, just sandwiches.
No drinks, no alcohol. They do come with like a side salad.
I'm going to say 18 each.
Pretty close. I'm not great at math, but it was a total of $48.
Okay, so 48 for 3 would be 16.
So, yeah, 40. So I remember this happens all the time now. Like, I'll pick up my kids from somewhere and they'll be like, hey, do you mind if we just swing by a Panera or Chick-fil-A? And a few years ago, I would have been like, why not? It's going to cost us like 15 or 20 bucks, maybe.
Right.
Yeah. I'm coming away with like $75 at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
I'm already, and I know this didn't just happen. This has been accumulating over the last decade, but it is getting ridiculous out there, Bill.
Now, I want to be a little fair here. Because I bet when you talk about like fast food type costs, I assume some of that is for the legitimate reason where there was a lot of activism around raising the minimum wage for fast food workers and minimum wage generally. I don't know. I think West Virginia is still on the low side for minimum wage, so maybe it doesn't apply there. But we shouldn't be having cheap food on the backs of people earning wages that you can't live on. So I probably wouldn't attribute all of that to Donald Trump. I know around where I am, like the McDonald's is more expensive than what it used to be, and that's because of the labor costs. But more broadly, grocery stores and such, you can't put that all on minimum wage, I would imagine.
It used to be so. I remember I used to be a big fan of going out to lunch as opposed to dinner, and you used to be able to like go to lunch. Like, this will date me, Bill. This will make me seem super old. But when I started working at the Leadership Institute in Arlington, Virginia, there was a place called Faccia Luna. You could get 2 slices of pizza, a side salad, and an iced tea for $4.95. That was their lunch special. And these were big slices of I don't want to call it gourmet pizza, but this isn't like Domino's or something. It was a nice place. I think they closed down. I think it was up to like $25. Now granted, time has passed. This happens. It's like old guy shakes fist at cloud or whatever. But things are getting expensive, and I've definitely noticed it in recent years. And look, I wouldn't even be bitching about it, except for the fact that this is probably the reason Joe Biden lost. It seemed people thought it was a big deal a few years ago. Will they continue to think it's a big deal, or is it because Trump is president now? It doesn't matter as long as those trans athletes are, are not invading my soccer.
If you're a diehard MAGA, you're not going to care, and your complaint was disingenuous. But I think for the average voter, you do care, and you were promised a break, and you didn't get it. Now, here's one thing that I have no idea if this is tariff related or not. This is just anecdotal me griping. So I was going to make some Mexican street corn. When you make a Mexican street corn, you need cojita cheese, and I wanted to get the fresh block of cheese, and there at the grocery stores near me, I've gotten it before. I have two main supermarkets near where I live. And I could not find a block of that in either store this weekend. I could find some pre-graded, which I did use. So I did survive. My first world problem was solved. But I thought it was strange that an item that I normally would get, presumably imported from Mexico, I couldn't get. And I wonder if that was tariff related.
I don't know. Let me just take this personal. It's not about availability, but back to me complaining about prices, Bill. I've got two sons. My oldest boy is 14. He's like 6'1", and I'm guessing he weighs, I don't know, 180, something like that. My other kid is 12, and he's like 5'1", and he's a little chunkier. These kids put away some groceries, and I mean, you want to talk about this whole thing about not having kids, this crisis of the birth dearth. We're already, as a society, not reproducing at levels that would, sustain us. I don't know if we could, I don't know how we could afford a lot of kids. Imagine living in like New York City or Washington, D.C. Is it any wonder that people are choosing to have one kid or maybe none? The cost is starting to get really out of control.
Well, the problem in Washington, D.C., Matt, is not the cost of groceries. It's that you can't walk down the street without bullets flying past your head. Everybody knows it's a war zone.
Right. Well, good segue, Bill. Let's talk about this. Bill, of course, is talking about the fact that this week, after the tragic beating of a guy named Big Balls, a former Doge staffer, apparently that was the impetus for this. That Donald Trump has announced that he's going to send in, I think it's the National Guard, as well as federalizing the metropolitan.
He's writing FBI agents.
And the FBI, and federalizing the Metropolitan Police Department. And the one, the question is, A, is crime really that bad in D.C. To warrant this? And B, what are Trump's motives? Like, does he really care about crime in D.C., or is this some sort of power play? But I have thoughts, Bill. But what's your take?
Well, I just wrote about this in the Washington Monthly, so feel free to check that out. You might be familiar with the phrase "facts don't care about your feelings."
Yes, Ben Shapiro, right?
I don't know if he coined it or if he popularized it, but he definitely, it's associated with him. It's certainly something that conservatives say all the time, or had said all the time. And now, when you hear Democrats and journalists say, crime is at a 30-year low in D.C. Who cares about what the statistics are? How does it feel? Do you feel safe in D.C.? That's what matters here. And I heard that, and I'm just from diehard conservative types. I heard that from Alex Thompson from Axios on CNN. I heard from Joe Scarborough on MSNBC. He was a conservative Republican. He's kind of come back. I know you guys know each other, but Scarborough at least was saying, I'm not saying we should bring in the military.
Yeah,
but he was kind of scolding Democrats, saying, you shouldn't be getting all bent out of shape about the stats. You should talk about the vibe. And one thing I've heard come out of some conservatives, actually, I went to Ben Shapiro's site, the Daily Wire. Shapiro himself seems to be off on vacay, but one of his people was making the argument that Trump has the right to do this. This is not like other cities.
Right.
And there is truth to that. There is a law, in the Home Rule Act that largely gives D.C. a more autonomy, does give the president the authority to declare an emergency and to take over the Metropolitan Police Department for 30 days. Then after that has to be something that Congress passes. So it is a power that he has, but I think it's accurate to say if you're using phony information to claim there's an emergency when there is not one, then you are abusing that power.
Trump does that all the time. This is Trump's MO. He calls things emergencies that are not emergencies. He did that in his first term as it pertains to the wall, as I recall.
Yes. That's what authoritarians do. Now, I think it is fair to use that language, even if this isn't technically illegal or technically unconstitutional, because you do have this law. But if you're abusing power, if you're using the letter of the law and going far removed from the spirit of the law to grab power for yourself when you do not need to, that is what authoritarians do. And we've already seen Trump say he's not going to end with DC. They want to do this in other cities, even though he doesn't have those laws to exercise that authority. But he's trying to justify the legitimacy of doing that. Well, if things are out of control and Democrat mayors aren't going to take care of it, then I'm going to take care of it. And it is a, and look, I think most of the media is doing a good job here, so I'm not trying to paint a broad brush. The reason why I know that the statistics are what they are is that reporters told me. But within the pundit class, you're hearing more of this, well, don't care about the stats business. Your job as someone in the media is to let people know what the accurate information is, and then they can draw their own conclusions from that. Don't just presume they have a feeling. And honestly, based on what? Because I looked at a recent polling from YouGov. They just last week asked, here are 15 issues. What's your most important issue? Crime ranked 12 out of 15, with 2% saying it's the most important issue. And that's nationally.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a snap poll that YouGov did in DC. I'm sorry, snap poll did. There's still a national poll. Do the use for what Trump's doing in DC? Plurality of 47% said no. Support was only 34%. And then the Washington Post was just person on the street interviews, and their take was that things aren't out of control. Crime might be an issue, but not justifying federalization. This is totally excessive and extreme, and the support isn't there. So if you're even going to say there's a vibe out there, base it on something, for Pete's sake, because I'm not seeing any anecdotal or quantitative evidence that is even the case.
So I talked to Charles Fain Lehman yesterday, who's kind of a center-right, but I think a straight shooter and an honest broker at the Manhattan Institute. And he tells me that, so first of all, the data that we're looking at, may or may not be flawed. I mean, it could be that people just have given up reporting things like shoplifting, because what's the point? The police aren't going to do anything. Nobody's going to prosecute the shoplifter. So that's one possible variable. But he also says, putting this in context, Washington, D.C., while it's true, the stats that you have cited, that the crime rate has actually fallen in recent years in Washington, D.C., it's actually much more dangerous than New York City or even Philadelphia. It's actually Washington, D.C.'s violent crime is really on par with like a Detroit or a Memphis, something like that. So I think two things can be true. It can be true that Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, is more dangerous than it ought to be, and that Donald Trump is exploiting this moment has sort of ulterior motives for exploiting it. That's kind of where I come down on this. If the motives were pure, because Washington, D.C. is the nearest major city to me, I would love for there to be increased policing and for the crime rate to fall, and for there to be more cops on the street. And as Charles Fain Lehman told me, statistically speaking, the way to solve crime is to really target. There's like maybe 500 people in the nation's capital who are responsible for like 60 or 70% of the crime. And this is basically two wards or a couple of neighborhoods where the bulk of this crime is happening. And so if you were to concentrate police in those areas, you could really disproportionately bring down crime. And of course, that could come with a backlash of folks saying, this is targeted toward the African-American community, civil rights, problems. But anyway, my concern is Donald Trump. Like, where does this stop? And this is a guy who tried to basically stay in office an additional term. Is he? It'd be, if I were an authoritarian who had sinister ambitions, bringing the nation's capital and the police department to heel and under my control would probably be somewhere on my checklist.
I want to make one other point about the data question before I get more broad. So there's a great Substack newsletter done by Jeff Asher called I think it's Jeffalytics. gets really, really deep in the weeds on crime data, and has a recent post about Washington, D.C., and talks about some of the nuances and some of the knowns and the unknowns, and acknowledges certain uncertainties, but also talks about the longer trends, not just this year, but going back, 20 years or so. And he said, MPDC's public data and the data report of the FBI mostly agreed about 2023. 23, there's a spike. So 39% increase in violent crime versus 41% respectively. And those two, this is Metropolitan Police versus FBI. The data for 2024 and most likely 2025 is more problematic, though, given just how sharply the decline in MPDC's public data differs from the decline reported by DC to the FBI. It's not unusual for MPDC's publicly available data to suggest a larger drop in violent crime than is reported to the FBI, probably due to the former measuring incidents versus the latter measuring victims. But the percent changes are usually reasonably close. For 2024, however, the FBI's drop shows a 9% drop, while MPDC's public data shows a 35% drop. We don't have 2025 data from the FBI to know for sure that the department's 26% decline from 24 is an overstatement, but I'd be very surprised if it was accurate. There's still tons of evidence pointing to declining violent crime in DC in 2025, especially gun violence. We trust the MPDC's murder and carjacking figures, which both show sizable declines in 2025, especially compared to 2023. There's also separate data from ShotSpotter showing a 16% drop in alerts to the first half of 2025 compared to the first half of 2024, and a 45% drop relative to the first half of 2023. So that's just one excerpt there. And you could say, I mean, we had a spike in 2023, it came down, don't pat yourself on the back because you have a decline from a spike. But even still, you go back farther 20 years, you're still down from where you were. And if you want to go from that, well, I still don't trust this data for this reason or for that reason. Okay, what data do you trust? Where is it coming from? You can't take one assault and extrapolate from that and to declare an emergency necessitating National Guard, FBI, and possibly even the military, which he hasn't quite done yet, but is threatened. That doesn't add up.
He doesn't. I mean, data. When data is in his favor, he likes data. When it's against, just remember the whole BLS story. I mean, there's so many parallels here of Trump's MO. The jobs report numbers he didn't like, so obviously he had to fire the administrator and claim the numbers were bogus or flawed. And of course, they're never perfect, but. They're never perfect. They haven't been. They weren't perfect when Biden was president.
Revisions, like they made a big deal about there being revisions, but that's always the case. You get more as you get more data. You're asking people to give you immediate jobs numbers.
Yeah,
and so you give an immediate number. It's imprecise. Everybody knows there was revisions, and so the fact there were revisions later just means like, hey, you didn't rest on your laurels. As you got more information, you refined your numbers. And I mean, this is where it's both authoritarian and amateur hour. If you want to, manufacture favorable numbers for yourself, don't fire the chair the day of the bad number, because that's just transparent. Like, wait a few months, come up with some phony reason, whatever,
Yeah, but I think this is also telling of Trump's MO, which is, you're right. If your goal were to kind of quietly do this, you could accomplish what he wanted to accomplish more subtly and clandestine. But what he wants to do is also send a message to anyone else in the future who might be giving him bad numbers to maybe goose the numbers a little bit. Maybe don't report bad numbers. Maybe only report good numbers. It's sort of similar to what what ICE is doing, right? You could do a lot of deportations very quietly. They don't want that. They want it to be public. They want a spectacle, because for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe it scares other people and gets them in line, even people in the media or academia. It scares them just the sight of this, but also it's part of the plan for self-deportation. If you're an immigrant, maybe you just don't come here, or maybe you get the hell out on your own because you don't want to be sent to El Salvador. So Trump, you're right. I mean, Trump could accomplish a lot of what he wants to accomplish if he did it sort of undercover, but like he wants to do this very publicly. And look, as it pertains to Washington D.C., you could the same thing, right? You could imagine that a president who prioritizes being a uniter and being a healer, who wants to bring the country together, giving a speech where he says, we are going to surge forces in Washington, D.C. to help support the local police department. And I've spoken to, Mayor Bowser, and we yada, yada, yada. But I want everyone to rest assured this is a temporary basis. We'll be there just 30 days. And this only applies to Washington, D.C. because there's a special relationship. This is the nation's capital. We have a responsibility to provide. You could calm people. But Trump doesn't want to do that, right? For a variety of reasons. He wants to keep his options open. And even if he has no plans to, let's say, go back into LA, it's probably good if people think he might, from his standpoint.
You phrased that, at one point you were talking about the deportations. You gave the rationale as being policy oriented, because this would be a way to induce self-deportation, which would improve the numbers. And I'm sure they tell themselves that sort of thing. But and this is just me, being speculative, I don't really believe they have deep interest in policy outcomes. I think Trump has a narcissistic psychological interest in exercising power for power's sake. And I mean, we talk about, Trump does things that other people wouldn't do. And sometimes that's characterized favorably, that he's more effective. He doesn't get bogged down in rules and norms and public opinion, and he's without restraint. There's a reason why other people have these restraints on them, because they care about what happens the next day. They care about the actual policy outcome. They care about how this might play electorally for, if not themselves, their allies, their party, how their legacy is going to look. Everything I see about Trump is pure impulse. What makes sense? What allows him to be the dominant force in a news cycle? And perhaps I'm being colored here by how much I watch Criminal Minds now, because I watch Criminal Minds with my daughter almost every night, and they often talk about the unsubs as wanting to exert power, needing a sense of release, sexual or non-sexual, in the exercising of power and dominion over somebody else. I think Trump kind of gets off on exercising power for power's sake. Mm-hmm. And it also feeds the political electoral framing. If there was calm in the land, what do you need him there for? You want to say America's great again, everything's gangbusters, but if everything was really that tranquil and lovely, why does he have to be there? He needs the foil. He needs the evil Democratic mayor. He needs the chaos in a city, which supposedly he's supposed to rectify, but if it's not being rectified, it's someone else's fault and not his, and he's the one who's going to take care of it. So he has to manufacture the chaos so he can address the chaos. And whether it actually gets solved is irrelevant. He needs the spectacle at all times. Prices, we're being taken to the woodshed, global trade, immigrants everywhere, crime in the streets. It's all excuses to exercise power for power's sake.
It's not there was a blitzkrieg coming out of the inauguration with these executive orders, and my head was spinning. So we're not quite at that level of a hurry up offense, but there's a lot of stuff going on. And I think that there's a philosophy that says you're always on offense, and comity and calmness is bad. So let's flood the zone, kind of thing. But also you're never satisfied. And so that brings us to the other topic we should probably talk about. It's a little, it's ongoing, but you and I haven't discussed it yet, which is the gerrymandering that's taking place. down, in Texas, and I think that's indicative of some of what we've already been talking about, which is, picking a fight, trying to, uh, kind of exploit things. You could just leave that alone. It doesn't. Most presidents, I don't think, would go there, but it's just this offense and picking fights, and sometimes, sometimes it works out. Like, I think it's possible Republicans could pick up a few House seats by doing this, but at the end of the day, it might even just be a wash. It might be a lot of expended energy for nothing. But what do you think?
Well, I'm generally in that place, and I've written about this too at the Washington Monthly. I mean, if you were a reality-based political figure, often presidents get in for the first 2 years and they realize, this is my time. We got to pedal the metal, do some things that maybe come with political risk, but we get points on the board. We know there's going to be a pendulum swing in the midterms, and so here's our chance to push hard. And you do it knowing, you know what, I'm going to do this, and chances are I might lose the House or the Senate. I might lose it anyway. And so, but I'm doing it because I think it's really important to get these policies on the books. And I think it's going to be good for the country in the long run. And it's okay if I take a political hit in the short run for it. That's pretty common amongst most presidencies. And they're not they don't take a dive on the midterm, but they kind of know, you know what, it's probably not going to work out for me. Or at least I'm going to accept that as a possible consequence. And Trump is not capable of thinking, long term. And I mean, again, in one sense, if you're worried about the midterms, if you're worried about having a Democratic House issuing a lot of subpoenas, maybe you wouldn't do all those policies. Maybe you'd go a little easier on the agenda to try to. Maybe you wouldn't do global tariffs that would disrupt the economy. But he made those choices because he doesn't think 3 steps ahead. And now he wants to do this with the Texas redistricting, and so a couple of data points here. So the average loss in seats for the out party, so the average loss in seats for the president's party is 25, going back to after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And you may argue, well, we're more polarized. We have a lot of gerrymandering.
Yeah. We've already sorted those out.
Sure, but look, Joe Biden's Democrats lost 9 seats in 2022, which was relatively good for a president's party, and they picked up a Senate seat. And so Democrats were generally applauded for holding the line, but they still lost the House, even with that. Democrats now need to pick up a 3 to take back the House once the vacancies get filled, just basing off of where you were at Election Day 2024. So even a relatively good Republican year is almost sure to mean that Democrats take the House. So again, if you have less swing, you still can probably get 3, 4, 5. And if you squeeze out a few more out of Texas, again, I can't be totally clairvoyant. Maybe that would save the day, but probably not. And at minimum, it's a risk because gerrymandering technology has gotten a lot better. I understand that with computers and AI and whatnot. But as far as I can tell, every analysis I've seen of this Texas redraw is based on the 2024 election. And that's nuts. That is nuts to base a gerrymandering on one election, on one data point. 4 of the 5 districts that they claim they're going to pick up are Latino majority districts. So you might see them referenced as plus 10 Trump districts. Okay, in 2024, when there was a huge swing to the right.
Yeah, and Trump was on the ballot.
And Trump was on the ballot. All the data we've seen in the past year is that pendulum's swinging back, particularly in the Latino community. So I would never base a gerrymander on that one data point alone. And so I'm not saying Democrats are wrong to panic about this and make a big stink about it, but it's very possible that this is not thought out well on the Republicans' part. And if it provokes Democrats to do redistricting in New York and California, it may be even more than a wash for Democrats.
All right. I think we can leave it on that. Bill, anything you want to plug?
Well, I mentioned my 2 recent pieces at the Washington Monthly, so check those out at WashingtonMonthly.com.
Awesome. Well, check out my podcast with Charles Fain Lehman of the Manhattan Institute, where we talked about data and crime statistics, and it's pretty wonky, so it's not as much punditry, but I think you'll enjoy it if you like that topic. Read me at the LA Times and The Hill, and catch us back here hopefully next week in the DMZ, Bill.
All right, take care.
See you, man.